I walked into my mother's 70th birthday gala straight from a 14-hour heart surgery, still smelling faintly of antiseptic under my black silk dress, only to find my reserved seat at the head table occupied by my sister's new boyfriend. My father took one look at me, smiled at the room, and said, "Oh, Rachel can stand. She's a surgeon. She's used to being on her feet." Everyone laughed. I pulled out my phone, opened the patient portal for Mercy General, and quietly canceled the cosigner authorization on my father's $80,000 cardiac procedure scheduled for Monday morning. Then I smiled back and said, "Of course, Dad. Standing is what I do best. Stay with me. You're going to want to hear how this ended. And if you're new here, I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight, because what I'm about to tell you took me 34 years to live and about 3 days to undo. My feet were swollen. That's the detail I keep coming back to, even now. I'd been on them since 5:45 that morning, scrubbed in for a triple bypass on a 42-year-old father of 3 who'd come in pale and shaking. We saved him. I remember peeling my gloves off at 6:52 p.m., and one of the residents told me my eyes looked glassy, that I should sit down for a minute, drink some Gatorade. I told her I had to be at the Bel Air Country Club by 7:30. I didn't have time to go home and shower. I had a black wrap dress in my locker, the kind you can ball up in a duffel bag without consequence. I wore my hair pulled back because the elastic line from my surgical cap had pressed a permanent ridge into my scalp. I dabbed concealer over the dark circles I'd been carrying since residency. The whole drive to Houston's west side, I rehearsed what I'd say if anyone asked why I looked tired. I wasn't going to say I'd just held a man's heart in my hands. My mother hated when I talked about work at her parties. She said it was off-putting. She'd been planning this birthday for 9 months. 70 felt like a milestone she wasn't sure she'd reach. She told me once at Easter, in the only vulnerable moment I can remember her ever offering me. I had cried in my car after that brunch. I drove straight to the bank and added my name to her credit card so she'd never have to worry about her hair appointments again. I was 33 years old and I still cried in parking lots over crumbs of affection from her. The Bel Air Country Club is the kind of place where the valets memorize your face after one visit. I booked the Magnolia room myself, 3 months out, with a deposit of $4,200 on my Amex. The catering was another $12,000. The string quartet $2,000. The custom centerpieces with white peonies flown in from somewhere in California, another $1,500. I had a spreadsheet. I always have a spreadsheet. I limped through the lobby. Yes, limped. I'd rolled my ankle 3 weeks earlier rushing from one OR to another, and even though the brace was off, the joint still ached when I'd been on it too long. I considered using the cane I keep in my office for bad days, but I knew what my mother would say about it. She'd already complained, when I told her about the injury, that I was always finding a way to make things about me. The hostess waved me through to the Magnolia room. I could hear the music before I saw the guests. The quartet was playing some Cole Porter standard. My mother loved Cole Porter. Or she loved telling people she loved Cole Porter, which I'd come to understand were 2 very different things. I rounded the corner and stopped. There were 92 guests. I knew because I'd built the seating chart. The head table sat 8, my mother, Diane, in the center seat with the embroidered cushion I'd had custom made for her bad back. My father, Howard, beside her. The spot to my mother's right, marked with a place card that read, "My seat." The seat I'd specifically reserved because the table had a clear sight line to the small podium where I was scheduled to give the toast at 8:15. In my seat, eating a roll, was a man I had never seen before in my life. He was maybe 26. Lean, tan, wearing a navy blazer that didn't quite fit. He was leaning into my younger sister, Brittany, who was draped over the arm of his chair like a cat in heat, giggling at something he'd whispered. There was an open bottle of the Rouge Clicquot I'd specifically ordered. Only a third left in it. My place card was tucked under the salt shaker, face down. I stood there in my black wrap dress, my hair pulled back from a 14-hour surgery, and I waited for someone to notice me. My father saw me first. He raised a glass. "Rachel, there she is. Come here, kid." I walked over slowly because my ankle was screaming. "Dad, who's in my seat?" "Oh," he waved his hand. "That's Brett, Brittany's new fella. Real solid guy. Works in marketing or, hell, I don't know, something with computers." "Crypto," Brett said helpfully, not looking up. "He's in my seat, Dad." My mother turned her head then. She had on the diamond earrings I'd bought her for her 65th, the ones that cost me 3 months of student loan payments. She looked at me for what felt like a long time. Then she said, in a voice that carried just enough to reach the next table, "Rachel, don't make this awkward. Brittany asked if Brett could sit there because he gets anxious in crowds and he wanted to be near her. We didn't think you'd mind. You're always so busy, we weren't sure you'd even show up tonight. I had paid for every chair in this room. Mom, I'm giving the toast at 8:15. The seat is right next to the podium because, honey." She smiled the smile she uses for the photographer at her church directory shoot. "Don't be dramatic, there's plenty of room at the back. You can grab a chair from one of the staff if you absolutely must sit. I had ankle surgery 6 weeks ago, Mom. You had a sprain, Rachel. Don't exaggerate, you're a doctor. You should know the difference." My father chuckled. "Yeah, kiddo, you're a surgeon. You stand for 14 hours a day. What's another couple of hours?" He looked around the table for laughs and got them. Brittany covered her mouth like he'd said something witty. Brett raised his champagne flute toward me in a kind of mock salute. "And here is the part I want you to understand, because if you've ever been the responsible child, the one who shows up, the one who pays, the one who fixes, you'll know what I felt next. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even hurt. It was a stillness, a kind of cold, clean stillness, like the moment before you make the first incision. I felt the weight of my phone in my clutch. I felt the weight of the cashier's check in the inside pocket. $25,000. I'd brought it as a surprise from my mother, to pay off the home equity line of credit she and my father had quietly let slide for 2 years and which I'd been told about in passing the previous Christmas. It had been gnawing at her, she'd said. She wasn't sleeping over it. I'd worked extra weekend shifts at the hospital for 6 months to put that check together. I looked at my mother, I looked at my father, I looked at my father, I looked at Brett, who was now feeding my sister a strawberry from the dessert tier I had personally selected. I said, "You're absolutely right. I'm a surgeon. I'm used to standing." My mother smiled, thinking she'd won. She turned back to the woman on her left to resume her conversation. I took out my phone. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I opened the Mercy General patient portal, logged in with my fingerprint, navigated to the financial guarantor section of my father's account, and clicked the small button at the bottom that read, "Revoke consigliere authorization." A confirmation box appeared. I clicked yes. My father's quadruple bypass, scheduled for 6 a.m. Monday morning, had a self-pay deposit requirement of $22,000 to remain on the schedule. He had 2 days to come up with it himself, or his slot would be released to the next patient on the waiting list. Then I opened my banking app. I had a recurring transfer scheduled to go to my parents' joint checking on the 1st of every month, $1,800. The amount that covered their property taxes, their homeowner's insurance, and the supplemental Medicare premium my mother insisted on for the better doctors. I tapped cancel on the recurring transfer. The next pull was scheduled for tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Then I did one more thing. I opened the credit card app for the Amex card I'd given my mother, the one she used for groceries, gas, and what she called the little things. I tapped report card lost or stolen. The card was instantly deactivated. Any pending transactions would be reversed in 24 to 48 hours. I put my phone back in my clutch. I walked over to the table where my place card lay face down under the salt shaker. I picked it up. I tore it cleanly in half. I set the halves on Brett's bread plate. "Enjoy the dinner," I said. I paid for it. I turned and I walked out of the Magnolia room, past the string quartet playing Cole Porter, past the hostess who looked up startled, past the ballets who hadn't even pulled my car around yet because I wasn't supposed to leave for another 3 hours. I told them to bring it now. I waited on the curb in the November wind. My ankle throbbed. I didn't cry. The valet pulled up my Lexus and asked if everything was all right, ma'am. I tipped him $40 and got in. I drove the 17 miles home in silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't take any of the calls that started coming through the Bluetooth 12 minutes after I left. First my father, then my mother, then Brittany, then my mother again, then a number I didn't recognize, which I assumed was Brett, which I let go to voicemail without ever finding out. When I got home, I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. I sat on my couch. And then, finally, I let myself feel it. I'd been the family bank since I was 19 years old. It started small. My father had been laid off from his job at the refinery the summer after my freshman year of college and never really recovered. He took odd jobs. He sold insurance for a while, then office supplies. Then he stopped trying. My mother worked part-time at a bridal boutique, mostly so she could get the discount on the dress she wore to Brittany's first wedding. The actual money in our house after I turned 23 and matched into surgery came from me. I'd co-signed the mortgage refinance in 2017 because their credit had tanked and the bank wouldn't approve them a loan. I'd put $32,000 into Brittany's first wedding because my mother said it was important to do it right, even though Brittany had only known the guy 9 months and he turned out to be a meth addict who lasted 11 weeks past the honeymoon. I paid for my mother's gallbladder surgery in 2019 when she discovered her insurance had lapsed because my father had forgotten to mail the check. I'd flown them to Hawaii for their 40th anniversary in 2021, business class. Both of them, while I flew coach because I'd run out of points. I'd been telling myself for years that this was love, that this was what good daughters did. That my mother's coldness wasn't coldness, it was just her way. That my father's jokes at my expense weren't really at my expense. They were just his sense of humor. That Brittany getting everything she wanted was just because she was the baby of the family, not because I was less. The night of the gala, sitting on my couch with bourbon I couldn't taste, I finally said the sentence out loud to my empty living room. They don't love me, they use me. It was not a revelation, it was a confession. I'd known it for years, I just refused to know it. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Mom. I let it go. Then a text came through. Mom, Rachel, pick up the phone right now. The card was declined at the valet. I almost laughed. The valet at her own party. She tried to tip him with my Amex. Mom, this is not funny. People are watching. Mom, Rachel, pick up. Mom, your father is having chest pains. I stared at that last one for a long time. My father's heart was bad. That part was real. He needed the bypass. He'd been on the waiting list for 6 months. The chest pains might have been real, or they might have been a manipulation. And the cruel thing about my family was that I no longer trusted myself to know the difference. I called Mercy General's main line. I asked for the cardiac unit. I told the charge nurse on duty, a woman named Patricia I'd worked with for years, that if a Howard Coleman came in tonight, please call me directly before any decisions were made about admitting versus observation. And please do not, under any circumstance, let the patient or his wife be told that I was the one who'd called. Patricia, bless her, didn't ask questions. She just said, "Got it, Dr. Coleman, I'll watch for him." He never came in. I checked again at midnight, and at 2 a.m., and at 6 the next morning. Howard Coleman never presented at any ER in the greater Houston area that night. The chest pains, it turned out, were a manipulation. My mother had used the language she knew I couldn't ignore. That's when I stopped being sad and started being precise. Saturday morning, I went to my office at the surgical practice. I wasn't on call, but I had paperwork I'd been avoiding. And I needed to be somewhere that wasn't my house, where my phone could ring without me feeling it. I sat at my desk and I made a list. Surgeons make lists. We make lists when someone's chest is open and the clock is running. Lists are how I think. The list was titled, "What do I sockily owe them?" Underneath, I wrote, "Nothing." It took me about an hour to be sure of that answer. I cross-checked it against every angle. Did I owe them gratitude for raising me? Maybe, in some abstract way. But my mother had made clear from the time I was 8 years old that raising me was a sacrifice she wanted credit for, daily. Did I owe them care because they were aging? Care, perhaps, but not unlimited financial subsidy. Did I owe them the lifestyle they'd grown accustomed to on my dime? Absolutely not. I called my attorney. Greg had drafted my will and my advance directives and the partnership agreement at the practice. He picked up on the second ring even though it was a Saturday because Greg is the kind of attorney who picks up on the second ring. I told him what had happened. He was quiet for a minute. Then he said, "Rachel, you've been propping up 2 adults for a decade. This was going to come to a head eventually. What do you want?" "I want clean separation," I said. "Financially, legally, everything. I want to know exactly what I've signed and how to get out of it." He told me to come to his office Monday morning and bring every document I could find. He told me, in the meantime, to write nothing down in text messages or emails that I wouldn't want read aloud in a deposition. He told me to keep my phone on me, but answer no calls from family members until he'd had a chance to review. I asked him one more thing. Greg, if my father needs surgery and I'm his co-signer of record at the hospital, am I legally on the hook for the cost, regardless of whether I revoked authorization? Depends on the paperwork. Bring it. We'll see. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house when I knew they'd be at my mother's standing Saturday hair appointment. I let myself in with the key I'd had since college. I went straight to my father's office, the room he called his study, even though the only studying he did in there was of fishing magazines, and I opened the bottom drawer of his desk. This is the part I'm not proud of, but I'm also not ashamed of. I knew my father kept a folder labeled insurance in that drawer. I'd seen him pull from it twice, both times when I was paying for something. I wanted to see what was in it. What was in it was 23 years of financial breadcrumbs. My father had taken out 2 life insurance policies on himself, naming Brittany as sole beneficiary. Not me. Not Split. Brittany. I'd known about 1 policy. I had not known there were 2, totaling $600,000 in payout. I had also not known that my father had refinanced the home equity line of credit a 3rd time, in the spring, for an additional $45,000, the proceeds of which had been wired directly into Brittany's checking account. I sat on the floor of my father's study and I read every page. I took photos with my phone. I put everything back exactly where I'd found it. There was one more file, slim, manila, unmarked. I opened it last. Inside was a series of printed emails between my mother and my Aunt Cheryl, my mother's sister, dated over the past year. They were about me. They were about how to keep me invested in the family. There was a sentence, written by my own mother to her own sister, that read, "Rachel will keep paying as long as she thinks she might one day get my approval. The trick is to never give it. Once she has it, she'll wander off." I read that sentence 4 times. Then I took a photograph of it, put the file back, locked the drawer, locked the front door behind me, and drove home. Sunday I cried for about an hour and then I made another list. Monday morning I sat in Greg's office for 2 hours. We went through the co-signer paperwork from Mercy General. He confirmed that my revocation was legally valid because the procedure had not yet been performed and the hospital's terms allowed withdrawal up to 72 hours pre-op. He confirmed that I was not on the mortgage anymore. I'd paid down enough of the balance years earlier that they'd been able to refinance into their own names alone, which they'd done in 2022 and which my mother had presented to me as proof that they could manage just fine without my interference. A phrase that had stung at the time but that now turned out to be the most useful thing she'd ever said. The home equity line was theirs alone. The credit cards in my name that I'd let them use as authorized users could be canceled with a phone call. The recurring transfers I'd already stopped. Greg drafted me a letter, 1 page. It said I was, effective immediately, withdrawing all financial support, that I would not be co-signing, guaranteeing, paying, or otherwise underwriting any future expense, that any verbal or written promises made previously were rescinded as of the date of the letter, and that all future communication regarding finances should go through his office. I had him send it certified mail to my parents and to Brittany. 3 letters, 3 signatures required on delivery. Tuesday morning, my phone rang at 7:04 a.m. Mom. I let it go. It rang again at 7:06. Dad. I let it go. It rang at 7:09. Brittany. I let it go. At 7:42, my mother showed up at my front door. I knew it was her because the doorbell camera alerted my phone. I watched her on the small screen for almost a full minute before I went down. She was wearing the camel coat I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. Her hair was perfect. She had a casserole dish in her hands, the one she always brings when she wants something. The audacity of the casserole dish almost made me smile. I opened the door. I didn't invite her in. "Rachel," she said, and her voice was the soft one, the wounded one, the one she uses when she's about to perform contrition. "We need to talk. Whatever I did Friday night, whatever I said, you read the letter." She blinked. "What letter?" "From my attorney. Should have arrived yesterday." Her face did something then. A small adjustment. The wounded look stayed. But there was something underneath now, something harder. Rachel, this is insane. Your father is sick. You know your father is sick. You can't just... I'm not paying for the surgery, Mom. He has Medicare. He has supplemental coverage that I'd been paying for, but that I will continue to pay for through the end of this year because I'm not a monster. The deposit at Mercy General is $22,000. He'll have to find that himself, or appeal it, or sell something. There are options. None of them are me. You ungrateful mom. I held up a hand. I read the letter, the one you wrote to Aunt Cheryl, about keeping me invested, about never giving me approval so I'd keep paying. The hardness came up to the surface then. Her face went still in a way I'd never seen. You went through my things, through Dad's things, in his unlocked desk drawer. In a house I have a key to because I co-signed the mortgage that paid for the renovation that built that office. She didn't deny what was in the letter. That's the part I want you to understand. I gave her a full 10 seconds of silence, and what came out of her mouth was not, "That's not what I meant," or "You misread it." What came out of her mouth was, "You weren't supposed to find that." I closed the door. I closed the door on my own mother holding a casserole dish, and I locked it, and I went upstairs, and I sat on my bed, and I shook for about 20 minutes. And then I got up and I went to work. Because I had a patient at noon whose mitral valve I needed to repair, and that patient deserved my full attention more than my mother's manipulation deserved my afternoon. Wednesday, my father called me from a number I didn't recognize, which I picked up because I thought it might be the hospital. It was him. On Brittany's phone. "Rachel," he said. He was crying. My father, who'd laughed at me Friday night in front of 92 people, was crying. "Dad, your mother told me what you found." "Okay. I didn't know about the email. I want you to know that. I knew about the policies, the life insurance. That was your mother said Brittany needed it more, that you'd be fine, that you make plenty." I went along. I shouldn't have. But the email... I didn't know she was Rachel. I didn't know she was talking about you that way. I thought she loved you. It was the saddest sentence I'd heard all year. And I'd heard a lot of sad sentences that year. I asked him, "Dad, are you having the surgery?" They moved me down the waiting list. But they said if I can come up with a deposit, I can keep my slot. I'm calling around. The bank says no. The credit union says no. The credit union says no. I'm thinking about asking your Uncle Ray. I don't know. Sell the boat, Dad. He was quiet. "Dad, sell the base boat. It's worth $29,000. You don't fish anymore. Sell it Saturday and you'll have your deposit by Monday." He started crying harder. The boat had been his retirement gift to himself, the thing he'd bought with the last severance check from the refinery 15 years ago. He hadn't taken it out in 4 years. "I was saving that for Brittany," he whispered. I almost laughed. I almost screamed. Instead I said, very quietly, "Then I guess Brittany can perform your bypass." I hung up. He sold the boat. Got $26,500 for it 3 days later, to a guy in Baymont. He made the deposit. The surgery happened. It went well. I know because I checked Patricia's records discreetly, because I am still his daughter and I still wanted to know he wasn't dying. He recovered at home. I did not visit. I sent flowers from the practice's account, which felt about right. My mother and I have not spoken since the casserole dish. That was 4 months ago. She tried, once, to come to the hospital while I was scrubbing in. Security has a list now. She is on it. So is Brittany, who tried twice, the second time with Brett in tow, which was a choice. Aunt Cheryl called me about 6 weeks after the gala. She wanted to apologize. She wanted me to know she told my mother repeatedly that the strategy was cruel. She wanted me to know my mother had been like this her whole life, since they were children, and that I was not the first person to discover that the warmth my mother seemed to give was always provisional, always conditional, always a trade. I thanked Aunt Cheryl. I told her I'd be in touch. I haven't been yet. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. I'm allowed to take my time now. The thing they don't tell you about cutting off a parent, and I want to say this clearly because I know some of you watching are sitting with the same decision, is that the first month is the worst, and then the second month is also bad, and then somewhere around the 11th week, you wake up on a Tuesday morning and you realize that the hum of low-grade dread you've been carrying since you were a child is gone. Not better. Gone. There is a quiet inside you where the noise used to be. And in that quiet, you can hear yourself think for what might be the first time. I bought myself a chair last month. A real one. A custom-made Eames lounger in walnut and tan leather, the kind I'd been telling myself for years I couldn't justify. It cost $6,000. I sat in it the night it was delivered with a glass of wine, and I thought about the head table at the Bel Air Country Club, and the place card under the salt shaker and my father saying I was used to standing. I'm not used to standing. I just used to standing. I just used to think I had to. If you've been the responsible one, the one who pays, the one who shows up, the one who fixes, I want you to hear me. You don't owe them your seat. You don't owe them your seat. You don't owe them your savings. You don't owe them your career or your health or the chair you've earned by working harder than any of them ever bothered to work. You owe yourself the seat. And if they won't give it to you, take it. Or leave. Or pull out the paperwork they didn't know you'd kept. My father is alive. My mother is, presumably, somewhere. My sister is engaged to Brett, which I learned through a Facebook post my cousin sent me with the caption, "I cannot make this up." I wished her well in my head and went back to my morning coffee. I'm sitting in my chair right now, actually. Telling you this. My ankle doesn't hurt anymore. I get a full 8 hours of sleep most nights. I took up running again in February. I have a new patient on Monday, a 58-year-old woman with a failing aortic valve, and I'm going to save her life. And then I'm going to come home to my own house, to my own chair, to the seat that nobody can take from me because I bought it myself. That's the ending. It's not cinematic. There's no big reconciliation, no tearful Christmas where everyone realizes they were wrong. Real life rarely gives you that. What real life gives you, if you're brave enough to take it, is the quiet morning when you finally understand that you're never the problem. You are the prize, and they squandered you. Don't let them squander you. I think about that night at the Bel Air Country Club more often than I should. Not the humiliation of standing there in a wrap dress, swollen ankles aching from a 14-hour surgery. Not even the moment my own father told a room of 92 people that I was used to standing. I think about the email. The one my mother wrote to her sister. The one I found in a manila folder in my father's desk drawer. The one that explained in plain English that the entire architecture of our relationship had been a strategy. Keep her hopeful. Never give her approval. She'll keep paying. The reason that sentence haunted me wasn't because it was cruel. It was because it was true. I had been paying for 34 years, and I had never, not once, received what I was actually paying for. And the moment I understood that, I also understood the simplest truth I'd ever learned. Nothing in this life comes from nothing. Every action I took, every check I wrote, every weekend shift I picked up to fund their lifestyle was a seed. And the harvest was what I got at that head table, a torn place card under a salt shaker. That harvest was honest. That harvest was earned by both of us. I tell my residents this when they ask me how I got through it. I tell them that the people who love you do not require you to bleed for them. The people who love you save you a chair. The people who love you ask how your ankle is healing. The people who love you do not write secret emails about how to extract more from you. And when you finally see the math clearly, you have an obligation, an actual obligation, to yourself and to the future version of you who has to live with the consequences, to stop the bleeding. What I want to say to anyone watching this who recognizes themselves in Rachel and Howard's quiet cowardice, even in Diane's calculation, is that wisdom isn't knowing what's wrong. Wisdom is acting on what you know. I knew at 25. I knew at 28. I knew at 31. I didn't act until I was 34, standing in a magnolia room with my feet on fire, and the only thing that changed between knowing and doing was that I finally got tired enough to choose myself. Strength of character is not the ability to keep absorbing damage. It's the ability to set the damage down, to walk out, to send the certified letter. To sell nothing of yourself just to keep a relationship that was never a relationship in the first place. My father had to sell his boat to save his own heart, and I want you to hear what I am about to say very carefully. That was not cruelty. That was the natural order of things finally being restored. He had taken from me for years and called it love. The bill came due. He paid it, and he is alive because of it. Save yourself the seat. Buy yourself the chair. The quiet that comes after is the only thing in this life that no one can take back from you.